She needs the extra income more than you do, Sarah, my father said, not even looking up from his newspaper. You have your accounting job. Emma's still trying to find her path. I gripped the bank statement in my hand tighter, the paper crinkling under my fingers. The numbers jumped out at me. $8,000 in rental income from our family's apartment complex, all going straight to my younger sister's account while I paid the $5,000 monthly mortgage from my salary. Find her path, I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. She's been finding her path for the past 2 years while I've been working 60-hour weeks to cover the mortgage payments. My mother bustled in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Honey, you know how hard it's been for Emma since she dropped out of college. She needs this boost to get started in life. I looked down at my phone, where Emma's latest Instagram post glowed mockingly, a photo of her lounging on a yacht in the Mediterranean, champagne glass in hand. The caption read, "Living my best life, #bless, #entrepreneur life." The irony was almost too much to bear. I was an accountant at one of Boston's top firms, and here I was, watching my 25-year-old sister spend money that should have been split between us. Money from the apartment complex our grandparents had left to both of us. This isn't about Emma finding herself, I said, laying the bank statement on the coffee table. This is about basic fairness. We co-own the building. Why am I paying all the expenses while she keeps all the profit? My father finally looked up, his expression a mixture of irritation and dismissal, one I'd grown all too familiar with. Sarah, you've always been the responsible one. You know how to handle money, how to build a career. Emma needs more support. Support, that's what they called it when they let Emma live rent-free in our childhood home while I paid market rate for my apartment. Support was their explanation when they used my portion of our inheritance to fund Emma's failed jewelry business. And now, support meant watching her travel the world on rental income while I drained my savings to keep the mortgage current. I pulled up the property management app on my phone, scrolling through the occupancy reports. All 20 units were rented, most at above market rates thanks to the recent renovations I'd overseen and paid for. The building was more profitable than ever, and I hadn't seen a single cent of it. Did you know she's charging the tenants for parking now? I asked, turning my phone to show them the updated lease agreements. That's an extra $200 per spot. Where's that money going? My mother's face clouded with confusion. Parking fees. But we've never charged for parking before. Emma said it was standard practice now. My father interjected quickly. She's modernizing the business model. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Modernizing? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I stand, it looks like embezzlement. The word hung in the air like a thundercloud. My mother gasped, and my father's face turned an interesting shade of red. How dare you? He sputtered. Your own sister. My own sister, I cut in, is collecting money from our jointly owned property without documentation, without splitting the profit, and without paying taxes on the income. Do you know what the IRS calls that? The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost see the wheels turning in my father's head as he processed the implications. My mother had sunk into her favorite armchair, twisting her wedding ring anxiously. You wouldn't, my father said finally, his voice low. You wouldn't report your own family. I stood up, gathering my things. I've documented everything for the past 2 years. Every mortgage payment from my account, every deposit into Emma's, every renovation bill I paid, every lease agreement she modified without my consent. I even have screenshots of her social media posts showing expenses that don't match her reported income. Sarah, please, my mother pleaded. We can work this out as a family. Family. The word had lost its meaning somewhere between Emma's third luxury vacation this year and my dwindling retirement savings. I'm done working things out as a family, I said, heading for the door. From now on, we can work things out legally. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Another Instagram notification from Emma, a photo of her shopping in Milan, designer bags hanging from both arms. Sometimes you have to spoil yourself. #entrepreneur, #businesswoman. I smiled, starting my car. Emma had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Back at my apartment, I pulled out the carefully organized file I'd been building for the past year. Inside were bank statements, property records, tax documents, and a detailed log of every conversation I'd had with my family about the rental income. But the most damning evidence was the letter I'd received last week from the IRS confirming receipt of my whistleblower report. I'd submitted it anonymously, of course. Let them think it came from a disgruntled tenant or a nosy neighbor. The important thing was that it had triggered an audit, and when the auditor arrived, they would find exactly what I knew they would. Years of unreported income, misappropriated funds, and tax evasion. My phone rang, Emma's face lighting up the screen. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing what she wanted. She'd been calling more frequently lately, usually to complain about maintenance costs or ask me to cover an unexpected expense. Last week, it was a new security system. The week before, she needed the lobby renovated to maintain our property value. The voicemail notification popped up, and I played it on speaker. Sarah, hey. I know you're probably busy with your boring accountant stuff, but I need a tiny favor. The property taxes are due next week. Can you handle that? I'm still in Europe, and these international transfers are such a hassle. Thanks, sis. Love you. I saved the voicemail, adding it to my evidence file. Property taxes were $24,000 annually, and this would have been the third year I paid them while Emma collected the rent. But not this time. This time, the payment would come due exactly 3 days after the IRS audit began. My laptop pinged with an email notification. It was from Marcus Chen, the IRS auditor assigned to our case. He wanted to schedule an initial meeting at the property next week. Perfect timing. I drafted a quick response, agreeing to the meeting and offering to provide any documentation he needed. Then I wrote a second email to our property manager, requesting complete records of all rental payments, maintenance expenses, and lease modifications for the past 3 years. The property manager's response was almost immediate. Sarah, your sister told us to send all records directly to her. Should I check with her first? I smiled, typing my reply. As co-owner of the property, I have an equal right to all records. Please send them to me immediately, and in the future, any changes to property management must have my written approval. Attached to my email was a copy of the property deed, showing my 50% ownership stake. Let Emma try to block this request. It would only add to the evidence of her financial misconduct. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. Please call us. We need to talk about this as a family. I ignored it, focusing instead on organizing my documentation for the upcoming audit. They had 2 years to talk about this as a family. 2 years of watching Emma spend money that should have been shared, of listening to their excuses about why she deserved it more than I did. Now it was time for someone else to look at the numbers. Someone who wouldn't be swayed by family ties or emotional manipulation. Someone who would see exactly what I'd seen, a clear pattern of financial abuse masked as family support. I opened my spreadsheet detailing the property's finances. The numbers told a compelling story. Monthly rental income, $8,000. Parking fees, 20 spots x $200, $4,000. Total monthly revenue, $12,000. Expenses, mortgage, paid by me, $5,000. Insurance, paid by me, $800. Maintenance, paid by me, $1,200. Property taxes, paid by me, $2,000. Total monthly expenses, $9,000. Total monthly profit, taken by Emma, $12,000. The disparity was stark, and that was before factoring in the renovations I funded or the additional fees Emma had implemented without my knowledge. The IRS would have a field day with this. My doorbell rang, startling me from my calculations. Through the peephole, I saw my father standing in the hallway, his face set in the stern expression he used when he thought he could intimidate me into compliance. I didn't open the door. Sarah, he called out, knocking again. We need to talk about this. You're making a huge mistake. I sat back down at my desk, putting on my noise-canceling headphones as he continued to knock. The only mistake I'd made was letting this go on for so long. But that was about to change. My laptop pinged again. Another email from Marcus Chen confirming our meeting for next Tuesday at 9 a.m. I marked my calendar, adding a reminder to bring copies of all my documentation. Let Emma enjoy her European shopping spree. Let my parents try to guilt me into backing down. In 1 week, everything would change, and no amount of family pressure could stop what was coming. The truth was in the numbers, and numbers don't lie, no matter how much my family wished they would. The day before the IRS audit, Emma finally came home from Europe. I watched through my office window as her taxi pulled up to the apartment complex, designer luggage spilling out of the trunk. She looked tanned and carefree, chatting animatedly on her phone as the driver struggled with her bags. "You won't believe what Sarah's doing," I heard her say as she passed beneath my window. "She's being completely unreasonable about the property taxes. I mean, she's an accountant. She knows how to handle these things." I smiled, turning back to my computer, where Marcus Chen's final confirmation email waited. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Emma had no idea she'd returned just in time for the storm. My phone lit up with a text from our property manager. "Your sister is asking for the rental payment records. Should I send them?" "Yes," I replied. "Send her exactly what you sent me. Let her see the paper trail. Let her realize what she'd done." Within an hour, my father was calling. I picked up on the third ring, putting him on speaker as I continued organizing my documentation. "What's this about an IRS audit?" he demanded, skipping any pretense of greeting. "Oh, you've heard about that?" I kept my voice casual. "Yes, they're doing a routine check of the property's finances tomorrow morning. Emma should have plenty of documentation for all that rental income she's been collecting." There was a long pause. I could almost hear him sweating. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "I know you're upset about the income distribution, but bringing in the IRS, this could hurt the whole family." "The whole family?" I repeated. Like I've been hurt watching my savings disappear while Emma posts about her 4th vacation this year? That kind of hurt. "You know that's different." "Nope, Dad, it's not different. It's actually very simple. Either Emma reports her income and pays her taxes like everyone else, or she faces the consequences. That's how the real world works." "We can fix this internally," he pleaded. "Your mother and I will make sure Emma starts sharing the rental income. We'll set up a proper agreement." I glanced at my evidence file, thinking of the 2 years of meticulous records it contained. "It's too late for that. The audit starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I suggest Emma brings all her financial records, if she's kept any." After I hung up, the calls started pouring in. Emma, my mother, even my aunt tried to reach me. I silenced my phone and focused on my final preparations. At 8:30 the next morning, I arrived at the apartment complex to find my entire family waiting in the lobby. Emma looked significantly less relaxed than she had yesterday, her designer outfit contrasting sharply with her worried expression. My parents stood on either side of her, like guards protecting their precious investment. "Sarah," my mother stepped forward, wringing her hands. "Please, can we talk about this before the auditor arrives?" "We've had 2 years to talk about this," I replied, checking my watch. "The auditor will be here in 20 minutes. I hope everyone has their documentation ready." Emma's face paled. "Documentation?" "Yes, Emma. Records of all the rental income you've collected. Receipts for expenses. Tax forms. You have been keeping records, haven't you?" She glanced desperately at our father, who stepped forward with a folder. "We have bank statements," he said firmly, "and Emma's willing to work out a new arrangement for the income distribution going forward." I raised an eyebrow. "Going forward? What about the past 2 years of unreported income, the unauthorized fees, the tax evasion?" "Tax evasion." Emma's voice rose to a squeak. "Dad, you said the rental income was exempt because it's a family property." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "There's no such thing as a family property exemption," I said, watching my father's face redden. "Every dollar of rental income should have been reported and taxed." "But you knew that, didn't you, Dad? That's why you let Emma take all the money, so it wouldn't show up on your tax returns." The lobby doors opened and Marcus Chen walked in, briefcase in hand. He looked exactly like his LinkedIn photo, precise, professional, and utterly immune to family drama. "Good morning," he said, glancing around at our tense group. "I'm here for the audit of property income and expenses. Who am I speaking with?" "I'm Sarah Mitchell." I stepped forward, extending my hand. "Co-owner of the property. This is my sister Emma, the other co-owner, and our parents." Marcus nodded, consulting his notebook. "I received your initial documentation, Ms. Mitchell. Very thorough. Ms. Emma Mitchell, do you have your records ready as well?" Emma clutched her designer purse, looking like she might be sick. There's been a misunderstanding about the record-keeping requirements." "A misunderstanding?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. According to our preliminary investigation, you've been collecting approximately $144,000 annually in rental income, none of which has been reported on your tax returns. That's quite a significant misunderstanding. My mother gasped. My father looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. And Emma finally seemed to understand the magnitude of what she'd done. I can explain, she started, but Marcus held up a hand. Please save your explanations for the formal interview. For now, I'll need to see any documentation you have regarding the property's income and expenses for the past 3 years. I opened my briefcase and handed over my file. Here's everything from my end: mortgage payments, maintenance costs, property taxes, insurance premiums. All paid from my personal accounts while Emma collected the rental income. Marcus took the file, nodding appreciatively at its organization. Then he turned to Emma. And your records, Ms. Mitchell? Emma's designer bag suddenly seemed very small and empty. I might need some time to gather everything. Of course, Marcus said, his tone professional but unyielding. In the meantime, we'll begin by reviewing these records and interviewing each party separately. Shall we start with you, Ms. Emma Mitchell? As Marcus led my sister toward the office, I caught a glimpse of her face. The carefree Instagram influencer was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood that actions have consequences. My father grabbed my arm as I turned to follow them. You can still stop this, he hissed. Tell them it was a mistake. I gently removed his hand. The only mistake, I said quietly, was thinking you could keep this going forever. The audit was about to begin, and I had front row seats to watch 2 years of financial manipulation finally come to light. Sometimes justice comes with a calculator and a badge, and I was more than ready for the show. The audit took 4 hours. I sat in the building's lobby, watching tenants come and go while various family members were called in for questioning. Emma's interview lasted the longest, nearly 2 hours of what I imagined were increasingly desperate explanations for her missing documentation. My mother emerged from her interview in tears. My father looked ashen after his, but it was the property manager's revelations that truly broke things open. Ms. Mitchell instructed me to create 2 sets of books, she told Marcus, shooting an apologetic glance my way. One showing minimal income for tax purposes and another tracking the actual rental payments. She said it was a family arrangement. I almost felt bad for her. Almost, but she'd been complicit in this scheme for 2 years, helping Emma hide income that should have been split between us. Around noon, Marcus called me in for my interview. The office was strewn with papers, bank statements, lease agreements, and printouts of Emma's social media posts showing expenses that far exceeded her reported income. Your documentation has been invaluable, Ms. Mitchell, Marcus said, gesturing for me to sit. But I have to ask, why wait 2 years to report this? I thought about those 2 years, the overtime hours, the drained savings, the constant gaslighting from my family about how Emma needed the money more than I did. I needed proof, I said simply. Undeniable evidence that this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a temporary arrangement. I needed everyone to see exactly what was happening. Marcus nodded, making a note in his file. And the property taxes due this week. Still unpaid, I confirmed. Emma was supposed to handle them with the rental income. I've covered them for the past 2 years, but this time, I shrugged. I thought it was time for some accountability. After my interview, Marcus gathered everyone in the conference room. Emma sat between our parents, looking nothing like the confident social media influencer from her posts. Her designer outfit seemed out of place now, more evidence of misappropriated funds than a fashion statement. Based on our preliminary findings, Marcus began, we've uncovered significant tax evasion and financial misconduct. The unreported rental income exceeds $300,000 over 2 years, not including unauthorized fees and undocumented cash payments. My father tried to interrupt, but Marcus held up a hand. Additionally, we found evidence of deliberate misrepresentation of income, improper use of business funds for personal expenses, and failure to maintain required financial records. Emma burst into tears. I didn't know. Dad said it was okay because it was family property. Marcus's expression remained neutral. Ignorance of tax law is not a defense, Ms. Mitchell. The IRS will require immediate payment of all back taxes, plus penalties and interest. We're also opening a broader investigation into your personal finances given the discrepancy between your reported income and documented expenses. She can't pay all that. My mother protested. She's used the money For what, Mom? I cut in. Designer clothes? European vacations? Instagram photos? I was building my brand. Emma shot back. My social media presence is my business. No, I said firmly. Our apartment building was your business, one you systematically exploited while I covered all the expenses. Marcus cleared his throat. Given the circumstances, we'll be placing a line on the property until all tax obligations are met. Miss Sarah Mitchell, as co-owner, you may be entitled to certain protections since you can demonstrate you were unaware of and uninvolved in the tax evasion scheme. My father's face darkened. You planned this, he accused. You set your sister up. Set her up? I laughed. By keeping accurate records. By expecting her to pay taxes like everyone else. By refusing to keep funding her lifestyle while she drained our property's profits. The evidence suggests, Marcus interjected, that this was a deliberate and sustained pattern of tax evasion. Ms. Emma Mitchell, you'll be receiving formal notice of the amounts owed, and I strongly suggest you retain legal counsel. As the reality of her situation sank in, Emma's tears turned to anger. This isn't fair. Sarah has a successful career. She doesn't need the rental income. Need has nothing to do with it, I replied calmly. The building belongs to both of us. The responsibilities and benefits should have been shared equally. Marcus began packing up his files. I'll be submitting my report today. Expect formal notices within the week. And Miss Emma Mitchell, I suggest you postpone any further international travel plans. After you left, the conference room fell into heavy silence. My mother was quietly crying. My father stared out the window, his jaw clenched. And Emma sat there, scrolling through her phone, probably realizing how many luxury purchases she documented on social media would be used as evidence against her. I hope you're happy, my father finally said, his voice bitter. You've ruined your sister's life. I stood up, gathering my things. No, Dad. You did that when you convinced her she was entitled to take whatever she wanted without consequences. I just made sure those consequences finally arrived. As I walked out, I heard Emma's phone ping with another Instagram notification. But somehow, I doubted she'd be posting about living her best life today. Sometimes the most expensive photos are the ones that come with an IRS audit attached. I had one more stop to make before leaving. I knocked on the property manager's office door. The auditor left these for you, she said quietly, handing me a stack of papers. New management authorization forms. You'll have full control of the accounts going forward. I signed where indicated, officially ending Emma's access to the building's finances. It wasn't the happy ending my family had imagined, but it was the right one. Sometimes doing the right thing means being the bad guy in someone else's story. But as I drove home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. The property taxes would still need to be paid, the building still needed managing, and my family would probably never forgive me. But at least now, everything was in the open, documented in black and white, impossible to dismiss or explain away. Sometimes justice comes with an audit trail, and I had 2 years' worth of receipts to prove it. 6 months after the audit, I sat in my office reviewing the building's quarterly financial reports. Everything was different now, transparent, organized, properly documented. The property was more profitable than ever, though this time the profits were being fairly distributed and properly reported. Emma had been forced to sell her designer wardrobe to pay the initial tax penalties. Her Instagram following had dropped dramatically after she could no longer maintain the illusion of a jet-setting lifestyle. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with our parents and taken a job as a social media coordinator for a local boutique, one where she couldn't access the company funds. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother's birthday dinner is next week. She'd like you to come. I hadn't spoken to them outside of necessary business communications since the audit. They tried reaching out a few times, usually with guilt-laden messages about family loyalty and forgiveness. But their version of forgiveness always seemed to involve pretending nothing had happened. Thank you for the invitation, I texted back, but I have other plans. My other plans actually involved meeting with a real estate agent. The apartment complex was doing so well that I was looking at acquiring a second property, this time solely in my name. I learned my lesson about mixing family and business. A knock on my office door interrupted my thoughts. It was Mrs. Chen, one of our longest-term tenants. I wanted to thank you, she said, setting a container of homemade cookies on my desk. The new security system you installed makes such a difference, and the maintenance team actually shows up when we call now." I smiled, thinking of how Emma used to ignore maintenance requests to save money for her business expenses. "Just doing my job," I replied. "This building's success depends on keeping good tenants happy." After Mrs. Chen left, I opened my laptop to find an email from Marcus Chen, no relation to my tenant. The IRS had completed its broader investigation into Emma's finances. The final penalties were substantial, and they'd found evidence of other unreported income sources. He'd attached a copy of the report as a courtesy. I didn't open it. I had done what needed to be done, but I didn't need to know all the details of Emma's downfall. My phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from my investment advisor. The rental income I finally started receiving had allowed me to rebuild my savings and start planning for the future. It turned out that when you're not subsidizing someone else's luxury lifestyle, you can build quite a nice nest egg of your own. As I was leaving the office that evening, I ran into Emma in the lobby. She looked different. No designer clothes, no perfectly styled hair. Just a tired young woman coming from work. She froze when she saw me. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I didn't know you'd be here." "It's my building too," I reminded her. "Actually, given the lion, I'm the primary owner now." She flinched. "Mom and Dad say you've ruined the family." "No," I corrected her. "I just stopped letting the family ruin me." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "I have to pay them rent now, to live in my old room. Dad says it's to teach me financial responsibility." I almost laughed at the irony. Sounds like an important lesson. "I'm sorry," she blurted out. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. I never thought about what it was costing you." I studied her face, looking for signs of the old manipulation. But for once, she seemed sincere. "You're right," I said finally. "It doesn't fix anything. But it's a start." As I drove home, I thought about how much had changed. The building was thriving, my career was advancing, and I no longer spent sleepless nights worrying about bills that shouldn't have been mine alone. My mother still sent weekly texts about healing the family. My father had stopped speaking to me entirely. And Emma, well, maybe she really was learning something about responsibility. But I'd learned something too. Sometimes the strongest family ties are the ones you break. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, reviewing the contract for the new property I was considering. The sun was setting over the city, casting a golden glow that made everything look full of possibility. My phone buzzed one last time, another family member trying to guilt me into attending my mother's birthday dinner. I deleted it without reading it. Some might call me cold or unforgiving, but I prefer to think of it as financially responsible. After all, I'm just managing my assets wisely, both emotional and financial. And this time, I've got the documentation to prove it.